When I was getting ready to go to my daughter's for dinner, my lawyer texted me. "Call me immediately." I dialed his number. What he told me about my daughter shocked me. "If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. If I slip today, I'll lose my granddaughter to the cold and to a woman who calls cruelty discipline." The front door shuddered like a drumhead when my daughter hit it with her shoulder. The old brass knob turned, and then Michelle was inside, breath sharp. Blazer rumpled the way desperation wrinkles a woman. "Mom, we're past the pleasantries," she said, marching across my rug as if it were a bridge she owned. "You're selling this place and cutting me in now." She didn't look at the photographs or the floor Bob and I refinished years back. Just at me, at the chair, the end table, the lamp, the bank of my years. My paper slid off my knee and onto the carpet. I stood because I will always stand in my own house. "You're upset," I said, steady as I could. "Coffee helps a woman think. Keep the coffee." Her laugh was hard as a nickel tossed at a beggar. "You're nearly 70. What do you need all this for? I have bills, real bills, and Emma." She stopped as if she'd said too much, then leaned on the word like it could sell me the rest of the way. "My girl needs structure." "Structure?" I repeated. My hands found the chair back to keep them from shaking. "Is that why she wears the same thin jacket when I see her? Why her lips go gray in December?" Michelle's jaw worked. She scanned the mantel and landed on the picture of Emma at Halloween, a fairy princess with a foam wand and a grin too big for her face. "You think I don't provide? You think you could do better with your pension and your crossword puzzles?" The lamp caught her sleeve when she gestured. It wobbled. I steadied it and then set down what gentleness I had left. "Get out," she blinked. She'd expected bargaining. "Maybe a speech about family?" "You don't mean that." "I mean it all the way to the curb," I said, pointing to the door. The finger of a woman who spent a lifetime measuring tolerances. "This house isn't a bank you rob when you're short. You're not short. You're greedy." Her mouth went mean. "You'll regret this when you're drooling in a home." "Don't call me." I had an answer perched on my tongue. Something about how she hadn't answered calls in years, unless there was money at the other end. But the truth needed fewer words. I turned my back and walked to the door, opened it, and let the March air come shouldering in. "You're done for today." My voice sounded like my mother's voice, the one I swore I'd never use. Funny how time loops back on you. She left with enough engine to set the neighborhood dogs barking. I locked the door and stood in the quiet she'd blown to pieces. The house still held the smell of lemon oil and old books. Somewhere 2 blocks over, a train gave its iron-throated complaint. I moved slowly past the photos. Bob's good smile. June holding her babies. Emma at 7, cheeks red from sledding. The knit cap I bought tugged low. I reached for that frame and did not pick it up. My hands were not steady. I sat in the chair that remembered me. The tremor in my fingers drew a small zigzag across the newspaper. It would settle in a minute. It always did. I breathed in the way the cardiologist taught me. In for 4, out for 6. I counted backwards from 50 by 7s until my stubborn heart slowed down and my mind got useful again. There's a point in an old woman's day when she knows exactly what kind of night she's buying for herself. Mine would be a long one. The phone rang and I thought about letting it go. The caller ID said Allen office. "My attorney doesn't call to chat, Allen," I said. "Maggie," he answered. "He'll be first to tell you I didn't pay him to be formal. You okay to talk?" "I am now." "Your daughter reached out to me this morning. Questions about your will, hypotheticals about competency. Odd tone. I don't like it." I closed my eyes and saw the lamp wobbling again. The flicker of the girl on the mantel. The thin jacket. "She just tried to empty my house with her mouth," I told Allen. "Emma needs structure." Allen is not a sentimental man, but I heard the breath leave him slow. "Structure, huh? She's colder to that child than winter." "If I fail today," I said, "I won't just lose money. I'll lose the girl to the cold and the kind of discipline that breaks more than it builds." "You want next steps?" Allen said. It wasn't a question. "I want the girl warm tonight, and I want paper between me and whatever storm Michelle is cooking. We plotted. Alan would tighten the documents, add language that saw around corners, no transfers under pressure, no sudden amendments without witnesses, no room to argue I didn't know my own name. We'd set a meeting for the morning. In the meantime, I'd rotate the combination on the safe, log serial numbers, and lock the upstairs door to Bob's old office, where the files lived. Simple work. Work for hands. When we hung up, the house seemed to settle. The grandfather clock in the hallway gave me 3 measured chimes. The light had shifted. The lace curtains threw a pattern on the table like frostwork. I made coffee out of stubbornness, then didn't drink it. My stomach had climbed up into my throat and refused. I ladled soup from yesterday's pot into a bowl and set it on the stove, turned the burner, and watched the flame catch. I'd been frugal my whole life, but soup for supper felt like a feast. The burner clicked off. I had turned it off. I couldn't remember doing it. The bowl waited, unsteaming. The phone rang again. This time a different name lit the screen. Michelle. I let it go once, twice, 3 times. I answered anyway. "Mom," she said soft. The word curled around my ribs and did its old trick. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. Look, I'm under a lot of pressure, but that's not your burden. Can we eat tonight?" My treat. "We'll start fresh." I pictured Emma's jacket. I pictured my daughter's eyes. How they used to meet mine without calculation. "Where?" "The chapel house," she said, picking the place she knew I loved. The old church turned restaurant with the stained glass that makes you believe in something again, even if you've forgotten the words. 7 o'clock. I looked at the clock. I looked at the soup. I thought of Bob's cologne in the air the last year he was here. How he'd lift my chin and say, "People can surprise you, Mags. Sometimes for the better." Then I remembered Alan's voice and the word competency hanging in the room like a bad smell. "Maybe another night," I said. She pushed. She was always a pusher. "Mom, I want to say this in person. Please. Not tonight." Silence stretched thin. "You'll regret this," she said. But this time she made it sound like a prayer instead of a threat. She hung up. I took the soup off the stove, set it on a trivet, and let it be. I wasn't hungry after all. I wasn't anything but tired in a way sleep doesn't touch. Kinetic beats have a way of lining themselves up whether you plan for them or not. I had just started upstairs to change the safe combination when a small knock came from the porch. The kind of polite tapping that belongs to people who sell cookies or read meters. Mrs. Chen from 2 doors down stood there holding my mail and a Tupperware with a blue lid. "I made too much stew," she said, eyes tracking my face with that neighborly radar that can catch a lie at 20 feet. "You look like you didn't make enough." "You're a saint," I told her and meant it. She set the container on my kitchen counter and glanced toward the mantel at Emma's fairy princess picture. "I saw the girl last week," she said. "Sweet costume, nice manners, good heart. She okay? Weather talk is the language of women like me. Neighbor talk is the language of women like her. Both can say more than they say. She's cold," I admitted. "Not just the temperature kind." She nodded. "I've got a spare coat. Good one. My granddaughter outgrew. If it fits, it's yours." She said it like an order, then softened it with a smile. "And don't pay me back by buying my cookies at the church sale. You'll only end up with too much sugar in your house." We stood a minute in the silence of people who have survived worse and don't need to name it. Then she left me to my stew and my list. Upstairs, I reset the safe, moved the documents, and put a lock on the office door. Bob had always teased that I made lists so I could have the joy of crossing things off. He wasn't wrong. Alan's list helped. So did the sound of my own breath traveling steadily in and out like a well-tuned machine. Around 6, I pulled on my coat and drove to the drugstore. The bag for my heart meds was light in my hand when I reached the counter. "Total with insurance is $65, the clerk said. I slid my card. Declined. I tried again. Declined again. The clerk smiled the way polite people do when a thing wants to be mortifying. Sometimes our machine is fussy. Want to try a different card? I paid in cash. I had enough, of course. I always do. But this small humiliation stuck because it was new. Back home, I checked the bank app. 2 automatic drafts had hit early. A winter bill I'd forgotten. Gas, electric bundled. The house costs what it costs to keep warm. And a transfer I'd made last week to buy Emma a better pair of boots. Michelle had never said thank you. She'd said, "I've got it," and then not gotten it. Tangible consequences live in small places. The way soup goes cold. The way a card hiccups in a store. The way your hands shake harder after your daughter throws words like stones. At 7:30, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail. Emma's voice is thinner on the phone. A read in wind. "Grandma, it's me. Mom says I can't talk long. I'm okay. I've got a consequence. So I'm sleeping in the garage tonight, but I have blankets. Anyway, I'm okay." She rushed the last part as if the words could turn insulation into heat. "Love you, Grandma." I stood a long time listening to nothing after that. Then I listened again and again. The second time, I caught the part she was trying to hide. Her teeth chattered between "I'm" and "okay." Cameron picked up on the second ring. He didn't say hello. "If you're calling to tell me how to parent," he said, voice low and fast, "save it." "I'm calling to keep a promise I made to the girl the day she was born," I said. "No lectures." "Where is she?" "In the garage, like she said. She talks back. She learns. That's how discipline works." "Discipline keeps a child safe while she learns," I said. "Punishment hurts to prove a point. Open the door, Cameron." Click. The line went dead. I called the non-emergency number for the Riverside County Sheriff's Office. The dispatcher's voice had the calm geography of someone who knows where every road goes. I explained. I used no extra words. I used the word cold twice and the word child 3 times. "You learn with age which words earn you action." "Deputy is en route," she said. "Stay on the line if you like." "I'll stay by the phone," I said. "She'll need a place to come if she lets herself need it." My voice came out softer than I expected. Something in me unclenched at having finally done the thing instead of thinking it. While I waited, I opened the hall closet and found the old wool blanket Bob used for picnics. It smelled like cedar, and the one Saturday we drove to the lake just because. I laid it across the couch. I put a mug next to the kettle and set a jar of honey by it. Small hospitality for a small girl. Sometimes the only victory you get is the shape you make for the moment that might come. The call back came fast. "Deputy Harris," a new voice said, low and clipped. "We're at the address. Garage door is closed. I can see a light under it." "Knock hard," I said, surprising myself. Her mother believes volume is virtue. "Yes, ma'am." Muffled voices, the shuffle of boots, a pause thick as cast iron. Then, "We've got her with us on the porch," the deputy said. "She's cold. She says she's fine. She's not. We'll be speaking to the parents about alternatives to this kind of consequence." The pause wasn't iron this time. It was kindness looking for the right holster. "Do you want to come get her for the night?" "Yes," I said, and my voice broke on the single syllable like a wave on a rock. "Yes, I do. I'll wait here until you arrive." I drove the way old women drive when the thing they love is at the other end. Careful, steady, one eye on the speedometer, and one on the dark. The garage door was open when I pulled up. The light inside made the concrete look colder. Emma stood between the deputy and Cameron, who had wrapped his arms around himself like a coat. "Evening," Deputy Harris said. He was tall, not much older than my granddaughter will be when this is all a memory. We talked. "The girl can spend the night with you. That sits better than the garage." Cameron's face was tight. "We were trying to teach her." "Open doors teach," the deputy said gently. "Closed ones do other things." Emma looked at me with a face that was mostly eyes. I opened my arms. She came in small and fast. Cold as a smell when it comes off a child. Metal and air and the ache of it. I wrapped her in my coat, and then added the spare blanket from my back seat. Her ear pressed to my chest heard the steady sound that made her believe what I said next. "You're warm now, sweetheart," I told her. "Warm and going home. At my place, the kettle gave me steam on its first try. No fussing this time. I made tea with honey and set her at the table with Mrs. Chen's stew. She ate like someone remembering what it means to be fed, because you're loved. I called the dispatcher back and thanked her. I texted Alan and told him our morning meeting had become more important. Emma fell asleep on the couch under Bob's wool blanket. The furnace clicked, hummed, and the old vents whispered warmth into the corners. I sat in my chair and let the quiet come settle next to me like an old dog. My phone buzzed once more. A message from Michelle. "We'll talk tomorrow. You'll see. I've got a plan." I deleted it without reading it twice. I stood and checked the locks a final time. Then I turned off the lamp and took one step toward the stairs. I didn't make it. I went back to the couch and moved the blanket up to Emma's chin, slow as a tide coming in. There are nights you choose where you will sleep. I chose the chair, the girl within arm's reach, the clock keeping honest time down the hall. Tomorrow can bring what it brings. Tonight the house is warm. Tonight I did not fail. By morning the house had a new sound, a girl breathing. It threaded through the hum of the furnace and the tick of the baseboard heater, and made everything else feel less like a machine and more like a home. Emma's hair stuck up in 3 brave directions when she sat up under Bob's old wool blanket. "I dreamed you had a boat," she said, rubbing her eyes. "We went to an island where the sand was warm." "I've got a car with 2 working seat warmers," I told her. "That's the closest I can do on short notice." She smiled, and then her face did a small thing I recognized from the mirror, remembering where the day would take us. "Do I have to go back tonight?" "We'll see what the day gives us," I said. "First oatmeal, doctor's orders." "You're not a doctor." "I'm a woman who knows how to use a measuring cup." She ate like she'd been given permission, spooning steam into a place inside her that had been cold too long. Her hands were red and chapped at the knuckles. When she wasn't looking, I took 2 photographs of them in the kitchen light. Evidence looks like a lot of small, ordinary things until it's time to gather them, and you're glad you did. Alan's office sits on Oakmont Boulevard in a brick building that believes in itself. I'd called him at 7, and he told me to come by at 9, with everything you've got, including your good sense. I printed Michelle's text from last night and the voicemail transcription from Emma. My phone app catches words better than I would have guessed. I wrote down times. I added the deputy's name and the dispatcher's. I know how to keep a log. 38 years in manufacturing taught me that if it's not written, it didn't happen. On the way out, I knocked on Mrs. Chen's door. She answered with a coat in one hand and a plastic bag of mandarin oranges in the other. "Tell that girl I want the coat back in spring," she said. "Unless she grows like a weed and can't fit it, in which case I want a picture of her in it today." "Done," I said, and meant it twice. At Alan's, we stayed 15 minutes in reception because his assistant had a patient calm, and 3 cups of coffee, more than I'd managed. Emma read a magazine about horses with one hand, while holding a mandarin with the other. Skin peels bright as confetti on her jeans. Alan called us in with a flick of his chin. He'd swapped his usual striped tie for a sober blue one. "Maggie," he said, then looked at Emma. "And this must be the famous fairy princess from the mantle photo." Emma straightened the borrowed coat. "I wasn't really a fairy princess," she said. "I was just dressed like one." "Most fairy princesses are," Alan said, and earned a small grin. He gestured at the chairs. "Let's get to work. Maggie, show me what you've got." I laid out the printouts like I was setting a table. Text from Michelle, voicemail from Emma, the time-stamped call log, the deputy's name, the photos of Emma's hands. Alan looked without commentary, his pen tapping once every few seconds as if it had its own heartbeat. "And the rest we talked about last night?" he asked. "Safe combination changed. Documents secured. Done, I said. Office locked. I moved Bob's desk files into the hall closet so no one can claim it's a working room. Alan nodded. Good. Now 2 tracks, money, and the girl. He held up one finger. On the money side, I'm filing a memo to your bank authorizing them to call me if any large transfers are requested from your accounts over the next 60 days. I can't block you from your own money, nor should I, but we can slow things long enough to ask good questions. And the girl? I asked. He held up the second finger. We document everything. We asked the Riverside County Sheriff's Office for the incident number from last night. We asked Deputy Harris to note what he saw. You'll call your primary and ask how quickly you can get the girl seen at St. Vincent for a wellness check. If the deputy notes exposure, St. Vincent will treat without parental consent if necessary. We won't go behind anyone's back for sport. We're protecting a child. We also talked to the school counselor this afternoon. Mandatory reporters know the drill and have resources. Emma's spoon of borrowed yogurt paused midway. What's a mandatory reporter? Good people who are obligated to speak up when kids aren't safe. Alan said. It's a job they do with their hearts and their paperwork. Emma nodded like she was filing a new word where she could find it later. Okay, Alan capped his pen. Now for the part I wish I didn't have to say. He looked at me, and his tone went as careful as a surgeon's hand. Your daughter contacted me yesterday with questions about your competency. That tells me a longer plan is at work. Maybe even a trap. She invites you to dinner with an apology on the menu and a stack of papers for dessert. Emma's head whipped between us. Like what kind of papers? Papers that turn me into a valet for my own life, I said before Alan could varnish it. Or papers that make it look like I'm unfit to care for myself. And certainly not for a girl who eats like a small, polite moose. Emma almost smiled. Alan raised his hand. Today, if you hear from your daughter, you do 3 things. 1, you set any meeting in a public place. 2, you bring a witness. And 3, you do not under any circumstances sign anything. I prefer rules I can count on my fingers, I said. Good. And Maggie? Alan's eyes softened in a way he usually bills extra for. You're not being dramatic. You're being prudent. There's a difference. We left with a folder, a plan, and 2 sandwiches from the deli down the block because Alan believes in protein as policy. In the car, I handed Emma the school excuse note Alan had printed on letterhead. I'm not skipping, she said, defensive by reflex. You're taking care of yourself, I said. And that landed somewhere she believed. We stopped at a discount electronics store. I bought a doorbell camera and a small digital recorder the Clark swore worked with 1 button. And no surprises. You starting a podcast, ma'am? He asked cheerfully. Something like that, I said. 1 episode only. Back home, I set the camera to watch the porch and the little patch of yard where the mailman tramples the same circle into the winter grass. I showed Emma how the recorder worked and asked her carefully if she'd be willing to repeat into it what her voicemail had said last night, just in case the phone company decides to forget. I told her. She nodded. Kids have an instinct for the way grown-up systems can lose things on purpose. She spoke into the recorder in a steady little voice that I wanted to wrap in a coat of its own. When she was done, I labeled the file on my computer and backed it up twice. Once to the hard drive and once to a small USB, Bob used to call the toothpick. The names we give things matter. Emma Garage Statement 2009, Dawevo, would mean more to me in a week than recording 3. At 10:40, my phone rang. Michelle? The screen announced as if I needed the reminder. I let it buzz once for my nerves and twice for my temper before I answered. Mom, she said, and the apology arrived first, soft and practiced. About last night I was out of line. I'm worried and it came out wrong. It did come out, I said. Wrong. A pause, a reset. I want to make it right. Dinner at the Chapel House. I'll make a reservation for noon if they've got it. We can get the lunch menu. Your favorite soup is on. The Chapel House at noon, I said, looking over at Emma. Only if you're fine with Alan joining us. Silence. I imagined her at her office desk, finger-tapping a keyboard without seeing the screen. Why would Alan need to be there? This is family. He's family, I said, and knew it would needle her just enough. He knows where the forks go. She laughed because she hates to sound cornered. Fine, noon. I'll see if I can get a table near the windows. We can start fresh. I hung up and put my hand over the recorder to feel its small weight. A trap isn't less of a trap because you walk toward it with your eyes open, but you can pick your shoes. Do I have to come? Emma asked, reading me the way only children and dogs can. You don't, I said. You'll go to school for a couple of hours. I'll pick you up at 1 and we'll go see a doctor who will say what anyone with eyes can see. Those hands weren't made for sleeping in a garage in March. She looked down at her knuckles, then back up. Okay, she said. And because she needed it said aloud, I added, you won't be alone in any room you don't want to be in. She nodded, then tentative. If Dad calls, can I answer? You can, I said. I'll be right next to you. He did call once, twice, said he'd had a chance to reflect, and agreed the garage had been perhaps excessive. Parenting, he informed me, requires consistency. I agreed that it did and told him mine would be this. My door would open when the girl needed it, and I would involve the people whose job it is to make sure doors open more than they close. He hung up with a sound like a stapler bitten in half. I dropped Emma at school with the excuse note, handed to the office lady who looked at the letterhead, and then at me as if she wanted to hug and scold and deputize me all at once. We'll have her meet with Ms. Lockwood at lunch, she said. She's our counselor. I left my number and, on impulse, a copy of the photograph of Emma's hands, with the date scrolled at the bottom. She took it like it was something more than paper. At noon, the Chapel House had the light of stained glass pouring its colored hush over the tables. Alan was there first, seated where a man might sit if he wants to see who comes in before they see him. He stood when I approached and squeezed my shoulder in a way that said what lawyers don't write down. Michelle arrived 3 minutes late, contrition practiced into posture. She wore the blouse I'd bought her 2 Christmases ago, the expensive one she saved for deals that required theater. She opened her arms like we were going to reenact a part of our lives I barely remembered. I gave her a hand instead. She shook it and used the shake to pull me close. Mom, she murmured low. Don't make this ugly. Lunch, I said. Soup, 1 thing at a time. She turned her smile on Alan. Nice of you to join us. Are we 3 splitting the check? Do you bill by the cracker? I bill by the hour, Alan said, smooth as an oath in church. Crackers are on the house, we ordered. The waitress had the sort of kindness that notices who's looking at the menu but not reading it. She recommended the tomato basil soup to me, and because my face betrayed me, added that it wasn't as salty as it had been the last time I had been in. Different cook today, she confided, and I believed her as if she oversaw the whole of the restaurant's fate. When the bread arrived, Michelle folded her napkin in her lap with precision. She could do precision when it served her. She leaned forward. Let's clear the air. I reacted yesterday because I'm worried. Your memory, your balance, the stove. Things happen as people age. I took a slow sip of water. Things do happen. She produced a folder from the chair beside her. Nothing like a daughter who says she's here to apologize and brings a manila envelope to do it with. I asked around, she said lightly. Friends of friends. It's common to put some paperwork in place just in case. Temporary power of attorney. No big deal. It protects you. It protects something, Alan murmured. Michelle's smile thinned. She slid the folder across the table as if we were sharing photographs. A notary's card peeked out like an uninvited guest. Just have a look. We can sign today and be done. Let's not sign anything today, I said. Let's eat soup and talk like people." She pushed the folder a fraction farther. I put my hand on it and held it there, steady. "Michelle," I said, and I used the mother voice I hate using because it feels like a hammer, even when you set it down gently. "You put my granddaughter in the garage last night." Her face didn't flinch, but her eyes did. "We gave her blankets." "You gave her a story she will tell herself every winter when the wind hits the eaves," I said. "You gave her cold where warmth should have been." "Discipline," she snapped, and then remembered where we were and softened it. "A consequence." Alan slid a paper from his own folder, the kind of move that looks like habit until you realize it's chess. "Deputy Harris from the Riverside County Sheriff's Office responded," he said. "He's written up his report. Maggie has the number. The girl has a meeting with a counselor today, and a wellness check after school." Alan allowed himself the smallest smile. "We're all doing paperwork." Michelle's jaw tightened. She reached into her jacket pocket and set a small pad on the table. A yellow sticky note square, with words written in her neat salesperson's hand. "Fine," she said. "You want paperwork? Here's what I'm offering." She slid it toward me. "Sell the house, move somewhere manageable. I'll help you find a place. We put proceeds into a trust. Everyone sleeps warm and nobody has to call the sheriff for attention." "Attention," I repeated, tasting a word that always leaves splinters. I lifted the sticky note. It said a number, a large one, and below it, "Now." I folded it in half and then in half again, and put it into my shirt pocket without looking away from her. "You're in trouble," I said, gentle because the truth can bruise. "A woman doesn't come at her mother with this much urgency unless something has her coattails." The waitress arrived with soup, and for a blessed minute we ladled quiet into bowls. The basil rose like summer. I ate and felt my stomach remember its job. Then I took the folder she'd brought and slid it back to her. "No signatures today," I said. "No decisions at a table where the stained glass makes everything look prettier than it is." She breathed out through her nose slow. "You think you're the only one who cares about Emma?" Her voice dropped to something that didn't belong in a church. "You think you're the hero because you've got time and a chair that remembers your shape." "There was the woman I knew. I let her show her face. I think I'm the woman with a spare blanket," I said. "Sometimes that's the whole job." She sat back hard enough to chime the silverware. "You know what? Keep your house. Keep your blanket. But understand this. My daughter is my responsibility. You don't get to interfere." Alan lifted his napkin and dabbed at the corner of his mouth like he'd caught a crumb of law there. "Protecting a child from exposure is not interference," he said. "It's civilization." Michelle laughed, all teeth. "You gonna put that on your website?" "You bet your retainer," Alan said pleasantly. We finished lunch with the kind of conversation that keeps you from arrest. Weather, basketball, the soup salt level. Michelle paid performatively and left the tip in exacting cash, like she was issuing an allowance. At the host stand, she turned. "Dinner tonight?" she asked, the words like chess pieces placed not for now but for later. "I'll bring her at 6, I said, "and I'll come in with her, and I'll leave when she tells me she's comfortable." She nodded without agreeing. 6. On the sidewalk, Alan touched my elbow. "You okay?" "Better than I used to be at this," I said. "Worse than I want to be." "Welcome to the human condition," he said. "Call me after the doctor." I picked up Emma at 1. Ms. Lockwood met me in the office, a woman with good shoes, and the kind of eyes that see two things at once. The child and the system the child swims in. "She's bright," she said. "Polite. She told me last night was a consequence, and then told me what her teeth felt like. I'll be filing with the proper channels. You're not alone. People say that and don't always mean it. She did." I thanked her and meant it like a blessing. At St. Vincent Medical Center, a nurse named Anthony took Emma's temperature and looked at her hands and wrote everything down, as if the act of writing could warm a girl. "Mild hypothermia last night by her description," he said, carefully neutral. "Chapped and likely early frost nip at the knuckles. No lasting harm if we keep her warm and moisturized and stop making garages into bedrooms." He paused, then added, "I'm making a report. It's not about getting anyone in trouble. It's about getting help they might not take otherwise." Emma squeezed my hand as if she'd found a rope on a climb, and didn't mind who saw her hold it. "Can we still have lasagna?" she asked. "Because priorities are how you stay human." "We can have lasagna," I said. "And we'll have a bag packed in the car just in case the night turns colder than the oven can fix." Back home, I put a small duffel by the door. Pajama pants. The fleece Bob had bought me and I never wore because it felt like a cloud that made me sentimental. Socks thick as pancakes. I added the digital recorder and a new notebook I titled in block letters on the first page. "Emma Observations and Events." I wrote the date. I wrote the time. I wrote that the house was 70 degrees, and the girl ate 2 slices of toast with honey, and asked if we could listen to the radio on the way to dinner. It looked small. It looked like everything. At 5:30, my doorbell, now smarter than it looked, caught a shape on the porch. Michelle. She hadn't waited for 6. She wore the same blouse. She'd removed the apology from her face. Only the purpose remained. "Change of plan," she said, already stepping in as if the act of entering made it so. "Cameron's not feeling great. I'll take Emma now. You can come by later." I looked beyond her at the yard where the light was turning the tips of the hedge the color of pennies. "We'll stick to the plan," I said. 6, I'll bring her. We'll walk in together." Her smile now had edges. "Don't be difficult." I moved my body just enough to make the door a question. "I'm not being difficult. I'm being chronological." She leaned in, dropped her voice. "Mom, you complicate this. I call a lawyer who isn't fond of crackers, and we spend the spring arguing about whether you're fit to make your own choices. Do you want that?" She lifted her brows in a way that used to get her an extra cookie. I put my hand on the door where the new camera could see us both. I let my voice go calm as a lake at 5 a.m. "I want the girl warm and safe. Everything else is a math problem for people who like math." I lifted my phone so the little light glowed. "And I want you to know I'm recording," she swore softly. "The kind of word that sounds ugly in a hallway lined with family photos. You're unbelievable." "Maybe," I said. "I've been called worse by better women." We held there a minute, a standoff civilized only by the fact we share a face, cut from the same stubborn wood. Then she stepped back. 6, she said. "Don't be late." When she was gone, the air in the house seemed to let its belly out. I checked the camera. It had caught the whole exchange. Light good enough to see her expression when she noticed the lens. "Audio clear." I saved it to the toothpick and labeled it like I label everything. Michelle Porch 5:30 p.m.MP4. Emma came downstairs in the fleece, sleeves too long, looking both small and invincible. "We're still going?" she asked. "We're still going," I said. "And we're coming back with you in the car, no matter how good the lasagna is." She nodded, and then she did a thing she doesn't let herself do often. She put her head against my chest for exactly 3 seconds. "Okay," she said into the fabric. "Okay." We left at 5:55. The duffel in the trunk, the recorder in my pocket, the notebook on the passenger seat under the insurance card I always think I'll need when I don't. The sky over Maple Ridge was the color of a bruise healing. That's when my phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. "This is Dr. Morrison. I received a call from St. Vincent regarding Emma. Could we talk tonight? Briefly, it's important." The contrite dinner had been the trap. The day had been the counter. And now a door I hadn't planned on was opening all by itself. The sky over Maple Ridge was the color of a bruise fading when Dr. Morrison's text lit my phone. I pulled to the curb and called him with the car in park and the heater ticking. "Maggie," he said, voice efficient but not unkind. "Thank you for calling back." I examined Emma's chart from St. Vincent and spoke with the nurse. Based on her description of last night and what we saw today, chapped knuckles, early cold injury, the shivering that took a while to stop, I'm filing a mandated report. I wanted you to hear that from me. Not as a surprise. Thank you, I said, and my hand found Emma's knee. She looked at me, not frightened so much as alert, like a kid learning a town by its bus routes. What does that mean for tonight? It means this, the doctor said. If anything tonight looks like a repeat, forced exposure, withholding warmth, intimidation, leave. Call 911 if you can't leave safely. If you do leave, text me so I can document that as well. And Maggie, don't be alone with a bad decision. Keep people in the loop. I've got a lawyer in the loop, I said, and a deputy who knows our names. Good, he said. One more thing. Emma's lungs sounded tight when she exerted herself here. Cold can do that. I'm sending an inhaler prescription to the St. Vincent outpatient pharmacy. I don't think we're dealing with asthma. Not yet. But I'd rather you have it than not. Emma leaned toward the speaker. Do I have to use it every day? No, the doctor said. Only if you're wheezing or it feels like there's a rubber band around your chest. And if anyone tells you to sleep in the garage again, the inhaler won't help with that. Warmth will. Emma nodded at nobody and everybody. Okay, Maggie, Dr. Morrison said quieter. Is she safe going back in that house tonight? She won't be alone, I said. And she won't stay if she's not comfortable. Then that's your plan. Stick to it and text me after. I hung up and watched the last of the light drain down the block like water from a sink. I could feel the girl looking at me. New rule, I said. You feel your chest get tight. You say it out loud. You want to leave? You say it out loud. You don't have to make it palatable for anybody. She worked the word palatable around in her mouth like a new flavor. Okay, she said. What if Mom gets mad? Then we meet Deputy Harris again, I said. He's tall and calm and carries a radio that makes people remember manners. Emma smiled, brief and guilty, like laughter had snuck past her guard. I put the car in gear and pulled back into traffic. Cameron's house threw off a square of kitchen light that looked friendly from the sidewalk, and less friendly as soon as you stepped into it. Lasagna waited on the stove, scent of oregano in an effort at normal. Cameron wiped his hands on a dish towel and aimed a practiced smile at the girl. There's my girl, he said. Ready to eat? Sure, Emma said. She kept her coat on. You learn fast when warmth has been conditional. Michelle came in from the hall, sleeves rolled, theater already underway. 6 on the dot, she said to me. We should put a bell on you. Doorbells work, I said, and the look she shot at the new camera on mine told me she knew exactly what I meant. We sat. Cameron served portion sizes that tried to send the message we all wanted the same thing. Emma's fork made scratchy sounds on her plate. Michelle poured herself red wine and me water with a flourish, as if what a woman drinks proves something important about her. So, she said brightly, soup at lunch, lasagna at dinner. Someday you'll thank me for upgrading your diet. We'll send you a certificate, I said, and saw Cameron's mouth pinch into a white half-moon. Humor is a small knife. Sometimes it opens a box, sometimes it cuts your own thumb. We managed 3 minutes of calm. Then Michelle set her fork down with precision. Emma, she said. The girl went narrower, the way you do when you think smaller might make you safer. Yes, ma'am. Tell your grandmother why we did what we did. Cameron didn't look at either of them. He studied his own plate like it had answers. Emma's eyes flicked to me and back. Consequences, she said softly. I was disrespectful. Michelle nodded like a woman proud of a pupil. Exactly. Disrespect has consequences in this house. Right, Cameron? Right, he said a little late. Describe disrespect for me, I said. So we all use the same dictionary. Michelle's smile thinned. We're not teaching a seminar, Mom. Humor me, I said. I'm old. I need clear terms." Emma stared at the lasagna. "I rolled my eyes," she murmured. "And I said I didn't want a shovel because my hands hurt." "They only hurt because she refuses the gloves I bought her," Michelle said to the room. "She wants special treatment for normal chores." "Is the garage normal treatment?" I asked, very mild. "We gave her blankets," Cameron said quickly, as if speed could add warmth to the word. "She was fine." "Cold is not a consequence," I said. "It's a hazard." Michelle pushed her glass away so it wouldn't spill when she leaned forward. "You called the sheriff," she said, and the bright tone went dull. "Involving strangers in family discipline is a line, Mom. We involved people whose job it is to keep the small safe from the large, when the large make mistakes," I said. "I've made mistakes. I've had people step in. It didn't kill me." She made her mouth into a smile and her eyes into something else. "Yes. Well, you were always fond of an audience." "Only when someone was performing." "Enough," Cameron said suddenly to both of us. He stood, collected plates, set them too firmly in the sink. "Eat your food, Emma." She lifted the fork obediently, and then paused, hand to her chest. "It's tight," she whispered. "Here." It was the smallest sentence. It rearranged the room. I was moving before I knew I'd stood. "Coat, sweetheart," I said, already reaching for the duffel I'd set by the door. The recorder in my pocket was on. I'd thumbed it at the threshold out of habit. "Inhaler's in the car. We're going." Michelle's chair scraped hard enough to leave a mark. "Sit down," she snapped. "No," I said, and the words sounded remarkably like permission. "She says her chest is tight. She and I are leaving. We'll be back when we're back." Cameron's hand caught the counter. "She's fine," he said, but his voice went high on the last word, as if he didn't think so. Emma coughed. The dry kind that means business. She swayed. I had her coat around her, and her hat on her head, and my hand on her shoulder. We made the door. Michelle's arm came down across the jamb like a gate. "You're not taking her," she said. "Move," I said, "or I will move you." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. She took one measured step closer. "You lay a hand on me, I call the cops and tell them you're confused and violent." "You do that," I said. "Make sure to tell them the part where your daughter slept on concrete last night." She hesitated. Only a second, but long enough to hear the siren I'd already called toward us with my thumb on the side button. I don't like phones that do more than ring. Tonight I liked mine fine. Emma made a small sound that wasn't quite a word. That decided the math for me. I shifted my grip, slid us through the space. Michelle's hesitation left, and was on the porch with the cold on my face, and the girl tucked in my arm like a promise I'd finally learned how to keep. Michelle followed, heat on legs. "Cameron," she called. "Get my keys." "No," he said from the kitchen, voice steady as a plate set down right where you meant to. "No." We were halfway down the walk when the first flicker of blue hit the hedge. Riverside County moves quick when children are mentioned. Deputy Harris unfolded from his car, like a man who knows how to use his height, and doesn't need to. He didn't put his hand on his weapon. He put it on the radio mic and squeezed once, a gesture that told every neighbor watching from behind curtains that order had arrived. "Evening," he said, breathing steam. His eyes went to Emma. "Breathing trouble?" "Tight," Emma said, hands still at her chest. "Feels like a rubber band." "Okay." Harris looked past me at Michelle. "Ma'am, step back to the porch, please." Michelle showed him her best business smile. "Officer." "Deputy," Harris said, pleasant. "Porch." Michelle went. "She's good at turning a retreat into choreography." "You're leaving?" Harris asked me, eyes back on the work. "Yes," I said. "Doctor wants to know if this happens again." "Good," he said. "I'll follow. Makes everyone's life easier." He did more than follow. He walked me to the car, opened the passenger door, and crouched so he was eye level with the girl. "You got an inhaler?" "In the bag," I said. "Use it if you need to," Harris told Emma. "The doctors will do the rest. You did the right thing saying it out loud." The girl nodded, something unclenching in her jaw. The deputy turned his head just enough to aim a sentence back at the porch, without looking at it. "Ma'am, sir, if either of you attempt to block this car, we'll handle that as its own thing. Don't make me write a second report tonight." Cameron made a small noise of protest that sounded like it wanted to be apology and wasn't brave enough. Michelle said nothing, but her face had gone flatter, as if she was setting herself to be the wronged party in a play she'd already cast. We drove with the deputy behind us and the duffel at Emma's feet. In the ER bay, order becomes habit. Triage nurse, pulse ox, a doctor who shakes hands like a woman who knows they're a bridge. Dr. Morrison met us halfway between a curtain and a monitor, coat still on, hair in the kind of disarray professionals earn. "Hi there," he said to Emma as if they'd planned to meet for pie. "Rubber band feeling?" "Less now," Emma said, "but still a little." "Okay." The doctor listened, the careful way you listen when the thing you're listening to is smaller than the stakes. He had Emma breathe, cough, breathe again. "We'll do 2 puffs to be safe," he said, "and then we'll sit here and be bored for 20 minutes. Bored is our goal." He put us in a room and stepped into the hall with me and Deputy Harris. "I made my report," he said quietly. "The intake team's already flagged it. I can't promise timeline. Bureaucracy moves like honey in February. But tonight we can make a practical plan." Deputy Harris nodded like people do when they've chosen the same road. "I can file a temporary safety notification that the child should not be removed from a safe caregiver until an assessment is complete," he said. "It's not custody. It's common sense with paperwork. If the parents object, they can object to people in suits tomorrow." I looked through the half-drawn curtain at Emma, who had her palms cupped around the inhaler like it was a bird. "We'll take common sense," I said. "Good," Morrison said. "And Maggie, since you'll likely have her for a few nights, there's a caregiver authorization form we can put on file. Lets you consent to treatment if she scrapes a knee at midnight. It's not a transfer. It's a permission slip the universe understands." "We like permission slips," I said. "We like them with dates and signatures." Harris's radio murmured the static of other people's problems. He touched it and then looked at me. "I'll go talk to the parents in the waiting room." "Keep it boring." He tipped his head toward Emma. "Ma'am, that one's doing her part. He left us to the 20 minutes that save you." The inhaler did its easy magic. Emma's shoulders settled a fraction lower with each breath. The pulse ox climbed from a number I didn't care for to one that made the nurses nod in that small, satisfied way that looks like a prayer, answered without fuss. "Grandma," she said, "I'm here. Do we have to go back tonight?" "No," I said. "You're coming home with me. Deputy Harris is going to write a sentence that says so in a language your mother respects even when she doesn't like it." She let her head fall against the pillow with the relief of a soldier who hears someone else's. "Boots, take a watch." "Okay," she said. "Can we have toast?" 2 slices, I said. "And you can peel a mandarin with your bare hands like a magician." She smiled for real then, the kind that brings color back to a face. Alan arrived in the doorway like a man who'd walked fast and decided only at the last second not to run. He took in the monitors, the girl, my posture, and nodded once. "We're not signing anything tonight?" he asked, a battered joke. "Only the forms that let the right people do the right thing," I said. "Doctor has a permission slip the universe understands." "Excellent," he said, and used the sleeve of his coat to wipe his forehead as if to polish his thinking. "I've drafted a statement from you, Maggie, about the events of last night and tonight. Short, factual. We'll attach the deputy's notice and the physician's report. Tomorrow morning we file a petition for temporary guardianship. That doesn't mean forever. It means the court acknowledges a reality we're already living. Tomorrow, I repeated, and felt the words settle in my chest, like a weight I could carry. Okay. Alan looked into the room at Emma. How are we doing, Captain? Bored, Emma said solemnly, and Alan's face did a thing faces do when they remember what they're fighting for. Deputy Harris returned with his paperwork and a face that had decided on neutral for the sake of the evening. Parents are informed, he said. They disagreed vigorously, which is their right. I reminded them they also have a right to go home, sleep, and not make things worse. They took the second option. Thank you, I said. I'm not the one who said the magic words, he said. He tipped his chin toward Emma. She did. A lot of grown women don't manage that. The doctor handed me 2 printouts. Discharge instructions and the caregiver authorization. Keep these with you, he said. If someone needs to see them, show them, and then put them back in your pocket. You don't owe anyone other than authorities a debate about them. Copy and toothpick, I said. Excuse me? Never mind, I said, smiling. Inside joke with a thumb drive. We left under the soft fluorescent light hospitals we're late. The kind that makes everyone look like they've been saved and are too tired to celebrate. Harris walked us to the car again, and then stopped, hand on the frame. A woman checking the hinge on a gate that matters. You've got my card, he said. If you don't, you do now. He slipped a fresh one into my palm, and then did a thing officers still do when no one's watching. Tipped his hat to a child who's been brave. At home, the house lifted its shoulders and made more space. I turned on the porch light, and because routine saves us, set the kettle. Emma sat at the table, inhaler in front of her like a trophy, and peeled a mandarin with the concentration of a surgeon. The orange oils misted the air with a smell that reminded me of summer in a room winter had not yet given back. Text the doctor, she said around a section of fruit. He said to text. Bossy, I said, thumbs already moving. I like it. I told Morrison we were home. The girl was breathing easy. We had paperwork and toast. He texted back a thumbs up in the sort of sentence that costs a person 5 minutes and saves another person a night. You did the right thing. Alan stayed long enough to eat a slice of toast and write the time on the front page of the notebook I'd started. 7:42 p.m. Tight chest at dinner. ER, inhaler, discharge, deputy notice. He underlined each item like a teacher who believes in lists, not because they're tidy, but because they chain the days together into a rope. Tomorrow night, he said at the door. Courthouse first, then we make lunch seem possible. Bring crackers, I said. I hear you bill for them. He smiled and let himself out into the night, his shoulders smaller once the job of the hour had been done. I made Emma's couch into a ship again. Blanket smooth, pillow at the angle she likes, Bob's wool smelling faintly of cedar, and a day at the lake we never took, but talk about as if we did. She brushed her teeth with the new toothbrush we'd bought the day I pretended we were just running errands. After, she stood in the doorway to the stairs and looked up at the dark as if nighttime itself were a problem she could solve by staring hard enough. What? I asked. Dad used to read me a thing, she said, about a ship in a bottle. The ship was safe and also stuck. I don't know if I liked it. We'll find you a different thing, I said. One where the ship is safe and also moving. She nodded once, a solemn little queen. Then she walked to the couch, burrowed, and let her body do that brave act of trust called sleep. I sat in my chair and let the day lay itself out like tools on a bench. The phone call, the lasagna, the rubber band chest, the deputy's hat, the doctor's steady hands, the signature on a form that isn't a solution so much as a bridge. Outside, the wind felt at the windows in the old way. Inside, the furnace hummed. The doorbell camera's tiny blue eye watched Maple Ridge forget us for a few hours. At 10, my phone buzzed. Michelle. I let it ring. It rang again. I put it face down on the end table and watched the ceiling instead. The faint hairline crack in the plaster I've been meaning to fix since 1998. A woman can live her whole life under a line like that, and only notice it on the nights she decides not to be afraid. When the house had finished settling, and the girl's breathing had found its honest rhythm, I stood. I went to the office door, locked as it should be, and then to the hall closet, where the fleece and the duffel waited. I added a pair of sneakers to the bag, and a copy of the caregiver form folded in thirds, the way my mother taught me to fold anything important. I replaced the batteries in a flashlight. I wrote, "Batteries replaced" in the notebook, and underlined it because sometimes an old woman needs proof she is still doing the small things right. Then I sat again, and moved the blanket up to Emma's chin, slow as tide, careful as breath. The day had pinched us. We did not break. We bent toward the people who know how to keep the small safe. Tomorrow there would be the courthouse and a stack of paper that weighs no more than a pound and changes a life by 10 degrees. Tomorrow there would be more people in ties than I like under one roof. Tomorrow there would be more chances to be kind and more chances to fail. Tonight there was a girl asleep in a warm room, an inhaler on the table, a deputy's card in my pocket, and a form with my name on it that said one thing in a language even winter respects. She is mine to keep warm until the people with stamps and seals say otherwise. The clock in the hall said 10:30, then 11, then whatever comes after a woman stops looking. Somewhere down the block a train spoke its iron sentence to the night. The house answered with a hum that sounded for the first time in a long time, like promise. At 2 a.m., the porch light cast a tidy coin on the stoop, where people with official hats had stood, and no one stood there now. My phone, face down on the end table, stayed quiet in a way that made me want to pat it like a tired animal. I breathed in for 4, out for 6. Cardiologist approved. Prayer adjacent. Sometime near dawn, a train stitched its iron sentence across the edge of town. I listened and counted and then didn't. The kettle began to think about whistling. The day would be full of things I could do and things I could not. The difference no longer scared me. Footsteps padded down the hall. Emma stood in the doorway, fleece zipped, socks her size for once. She looked at the ceiling as if checking her map, then at me. "Toast," she said. "Toast," I answered, and the word meant an old woman's kitchen, and a judge's order, and a deputy's hat, and a neighbor's steady heart, and a doctor who texts back, and a lawyer who believes in crackers, and a detective who walks a small dog under cold stars, and also, amazingly, sufficiently. It meant bread. She sat. I buttered. The furnace sang. Beyond the glass, Maple Ridge woke itself up one house at a time. It would be spring soon, and then not, and then again. We would keep the girl warm each time, not with speeches or timers or schemes, but with the boring, reliable machinery of kindness and consequences that don't confuse hazard with love. Morning has a different gravity when a child sleeps under your roof. The kettle sounds less like a whistle and more like a promise kept. Emma woke to the soft clatter of spoons, sat up in the fleece with her hair doing cartwheels, and sniffed the air like a small detective. "Toast?" she asked as if the day hinged on bread. "Toast," I confirmed. "And eggs if the hens at the grocery store did their part." She ate as if breakfast were a vote of confidence she didn't intend to waste. I wrote times in the notebook. 7:12 up, 7:23 no wheeze. 7:31, 2 slices, 1 egg, asks about school. There's comfort in ink that turns the private into a record. Alan called at 8. "We have a judge at 9:45 who isn't allergic to reality," he said. "Bring the deputy's notice, the ER discharge, and that porch video if you're willing." "It's already on the toothpick," I said. "You and the toothpick," he muttered fondly. "Good. And Maggie, no speeches unless asked. Facts carry farther than outrage." "The older I get," I said, "the more I want the paper to talk." "The paper will talk," he said. I'll make sure it uses its outdoor voice. We were tying shoelaces when the doorbell, my new small cyclops, saw a figure in a red coat and had the courtesy to sing about it. Mrs. Chen stood with a grocery sack and the kind of face you trust even when you haven't decided to. I brought tamales, she said, holding out the bag as if it were a peace treaty. Also, my grandson made me check our door camera last night after he saw the patrol car. It caught something you should see. She set a phone on the table and tapped the screen with a nail that could open a can. The video was grainy but faithful. Timestamp 9:03 p.m., the hour when kitchens across Maple Ridge trade gossip with their sinks. Across the street, Michelle's side, our view fell on their driveway and the lip of the garage. The audio was soft, but neighbor houses trade sound the way they trade air. Michelle's voice came first, the tone she uses when she wants the world to audition for her approval. Timer starts now, she said, hands visible. Jacket later if you're compliant. If you talk back, we restart. Cameron's voice, not quite a whisper, not quite a protest. She's shivering, Michelle. That's the point, she said, obvious baked into every syllable. Shivering is a feedback loop. She connects disrespect to discomfort. She learns. My hand tightened on the back of the chair until the wood made a small sound of endurance. On screen, a sliver of Emma's profile registered as a motion blur. Thin arms crossed, trying to be smaller than physics allows. She didn't cry. She did the quiet shake you do when your bones have decided to talk to themselves. Mrs. Chen's grandson, off camera, whispered, I got most of it. I boosted the audio. You can have the file. The boy's voice had that mix you hear when a teenager meets the world. Morsels of scorn for the adults being ridiculous. Ladlefuls of tenderness for the child caught in it. Emma watched the screen and held herself very still, as if movement would break something fragile and needed. I didn't know you could hear them from there, she said. Sound travels, Mrs. Chen said softly, especially when God wants it to. I thanked her the way women like me thank, with my palm over my heart and less eloquence than the moment wanted. She squeezed my wrist like a coach sending in a player for a fourth quarter, neither of us trained for. When the door shut behind her, Emma still stood looking at the black mirror of the phone. She had a timer, she said. The words were factual, not a complaint. She always has a timer. How long? I asked, voice steady because hers needed mine to be. It depends, she said. She lifted her fingers like she was counting ghosts. Sometimes 20 minutes, sometimes an hour. If I argue, we start over. She pulled her backpack to the table and dug past the world a girl carries. Spanish worksheet, pencil nub, crumpled receipt for a school lunch she didn't like, to produce a folded piece of paper with the stiffness of something laminated and handled. She slid it to me. It's the rules, she said, and the quiet pride in having gathered evidence told me she'd been waiting to hand me this for a while. I unfolded it. Someone, Michelle, unless my eyes lied, had typed a chart and then plastic sleeved it like a menu. Winter Compliance Protocol, the top line read, as if brutality could be improved with a title. The columns looked like a joke nobody would tell. Infraction, exposure level, duration, jacket threshold, reflection time, eye roll at directive, level 1. 20 min or no jacket, 3 min reflection, refusal to shovel. Level 2, 45 min or jacket at throide, 10 min reflection, talking back. Level 3, 60 minors jacket at 40 if compliant. Reflection 15. There were check boxes for restart due to attitude. At the bottom, in a sharp, neat hand, a note. If she calls Grandma, add 10. It landed in my gut like a cold stone dropped through water. This wasn't temper. It wasn't even neglect in the loose, sloppy sense that lets a person pretend. It was a system. It was cold mapped into morality. Who wrote this? I asked, my thumb on the laminate so I wouldn't tear it in half just to feel it fail. Mom, Emma said. She printed it at work. Dad said it made things consistent. He said consistency is love. There are sentences a woman hears that she underlines on the inside of her skull. Consistency is love applied to a garage. I folded the page back along its creases and felt something in me stop negotiating. "The judge is going to see this," I said. Emma nodded and then made her voice even smaller. "You won't get in trouble for having it?" "If anyone gets in trouble for handing me a piece of paper," I said, "they can talk to my lawyer and to the part of me that doesn't forget." We drove downtown with the furnace throwing its quiet warmth, and my mind inventorying each small tool we had. Deputy's notice, discharge instructions, doorbell footage, now protocol. Alan met us on the courthouse steps under a sky polished thin by a wind that liked to show off. He tucked the laminated sheet into his folder like a woman setting a match near dry wood and knowing what fire is for. "This is intentional," he said, uncharacteristically blunt. "That matters. The courtroom was everything a person wants from an institution. Wood older than all of us, flag hanging straight. A judge who kept his eyebrows and his sentences restrained. We sat at the petitioner's table with our pile of paper, and our hearts doing work they hadn't expected this month. Across from us, Michelle and Cameron arranged themselves into the shape of people trying very hard to look like the good version of themselves. Michelle had brought a lawyer who wore an expensive tie, and contempt like an aftershave. The judge, Honorable Pierce, as the placard said, looked at his docket, then at us. "This is a petition for temporary guardianship," he said. "Allegations of endangerment by cold exposure. We will proceed with facts. Counsel for petitioner?" Alan stood. His voice had the weight of someone carrying exactly as much outrage as the facts entitled him to, and not a gram more. "Your Honor, the girl spent last night at my client's home after being instructed to sleep in a garage as discipline. We have a report from Deputy Harris of the Riverside County Sheriff's Office documenting that removal. We have an emergency department record noting early cold injury and a mandated report filed by Dr. Morrison. And, Your Honor, we have a document written by the mother entitled Winter Compliance Protocol that systematizes forced cold exposure. May I approach?" You could feel the room lean forward the way people lean toward a radio when they recognize a song. Alan handed up the protocol. The judge took it as if paper could burn. His eyes moved left to right, down, left to right again. He put his finger on the bottom note. "Add 10 if she calls Grandma." And the smallest muscle in his cheek twitched. "Counsel for respondent?" he asked without looking up. The Thai lawyer stood and smiled the way you smile when you have an answer, and wish the question had been different. "Your Honor, parenting is not one size fits all. My clients employ consequences intended to teach respect. It was not below freezing in the garage. Blankets were supplied. The document," he gestured toward the map of cruelty, "is an unfortunate attempt to introduce structure, not a plan to harm." The judge set the protocol down as if it had weight. "You have an answer to the line that reads, 'Add 10 if she calls Grandma. Children sometimes manipulate.'" The Thai said smoothly. "Parents must stay firm." "Indeed," the judge said. "And courts must also." Alan didn't press. He didn't need to. He introduced the doorbell footage next. Mrs. Chen's grandson had already emailed us a file with a date and a time. The judge watched a minute of it, long enough to hear, "Timer starts now," and Cameron's, "She's shivering," long enough to learn the feel of the voices. He nodded once and returned the tablet. "Deputy Harris," the judge said. I hadn't noticed the deputy took a bench along the wall, but he had, hat in hand, posture that wanted to be invisible and settled for unimpeachable. He rose. "You removed the child last night?" "Yes, Your Honor," Harris said. She was shivering. She described sleeping in the garage as a consequence. "I advised the parents against repeated cold exposure. I filed a notification to keep the child with a safe caregiver until assessment." "Thank you," the judge said. And if there was gratitude in it, it was for more than a report. Dr. Morrison arrived midstream, hair admonished but not fully controlled, coat folded over his arm like a man who started the day at a sprint. The clerk swore him in. He kept his testimony as clean as a ledger. Mild hypothermia by history. Chapped knuckles. Tightness in chest that responded to albuterol. Mandated report filed. This was not a child who slipped into a chilly room. He said evenly. This was a child who was placed into cold and told to stay. Alan rested when the air felt full of facts and thinner on rationalizations. Thai counsel tried to pivot. He presented a letter from a neighbor with a first name only, Joan, extolling Michelle's love of family and commitment to structure. He hinted lightly, as if sprinkling parsley, that my age made me prone to misinterpretations born of cognitive decline. Prone, the judge repeated, and there are words that don't sound strong next to what we'd hauled into the room. Your Honor, Alan said, not standing, but not letting it slide past. The only confusion in evidence today is between consequence and calculated cold. Pierce leaned back the way judges do when they're gathering multiple thoughts into one decision. He cleaned his glasses with a handkerchief that had seen better starch. Temporary guardianship to the petitioner, he said at last, as if posting a speed limit. Effective immediately, the child will remain with her grandmother for 72 hours while Child Protective Services conducts an assessment. During that time, the parents will have supervised visitation at CPS. Further, a protective order, no cold exposure discipline in any form. That should not have to be said, but we will say it. Counsel, you will both meet with the clerk for information on scheduling. Deputy, see that the order is served. Michelle's face tried on 3 expressions in 5 seconds, and liked none of them. Cameron put a hand on her sleeve, and found, perhaps for the first time in a year, that it didn't move anything. I looked at Emma. She looked at the clock as if time itself had finally agreed to stop being a joke. We left with a packet that weighed less than a sandwich and would keep a girl warm for 3 nights. On the courthouse steps, we met a woman with a badge at her waist, and the kind of stance that says she can listen to grief without drowning. Detective Laura King, she said, offering a card. Family Crimes Unit. The mandated report will cross my desk this afternoon. I wanted you to know a real person reads those. I shook her hand, surprised by the steadying force of a stranger's name. We have more than the report, I said, and Alan slid her a copy of the protocol and a thumb drive with the neighbor's video, because I was already corrupting him with the gospel of the toothpick. Detective King didn't wince at the title. Winter Compliance Protocol. She only said, "That's deliberate." Then lower, as if talking to herself. And stupid. She tucked the evidence away. I'll be in touch. In the meantime, do the things on the paper. Don't do the things not on the paper. She aimed the last part at me and smiled, like she knew exactly how much trouble a 60 or 70 or 80-year-old woman can make when her blood decides to be 20 again. At the car, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, I answered because the day had decided to throw knives, and I'd learned to catch. A woman's voice, efficient. This is ADA Erica Stone. Detective King just pinged me. I'm not promising charges. We're not there, but I am promising eyes. If something escalates, you call 911 and then you text me. Numbers are on the card the detective gave you. I thanked her and realized my thank yous had been working the day shift and the night shift since dawn. At home, the house seemed taller, as if the new paper gave the ceiling permission to shrug. Emma changed into the sweatpants we'd bought on purpose, not as a contingency, and sank into the couch with a comic book Mrs. Chen's grandson had tucked into the tamale bag. Like a smuggled kindness, I hung the protective. Order on the inside of the hall. Closet door with 2 magnets from places Bob and I never went, but bought postcards of. Yellowstone, Paris. Lunch was soup and relief. Then Emma asked the question even good news can't quiet forever. What happens after 3 days? We keep you warm for the 4th, I said, and for the 5th. And we keep giving the right people the right paper until the paper and the people say the same thing. Around 3, Ms. Lockwood from school called. "We had a visit from CPS," she said. "They interviewed Emma here to avoid pulling her from class again. She did well, spoke plainly. She also mentioned a reflection she's told to do after cold. Do you know what that is? Like a punishment essay?" I asked. "Worse," she said, and I heard the scrape of her chair as she settled in, to be precise. "It's a script. She has to write that she is weak, and that discomfort is good for her, that it teaches her not to be dramatic. She uses those words like they were her idea." I looked at the protocol sheet and saw Reflection 15, as if it had been hiding a full sentence behind those numerals. The ledger wasn't about changing behavior. It was about changing belief. "Thank you," I said. "Please document what you can while the facts are fresh." "Already done," she said, and I liked her more than I had an hour ago, which had already been plenty. By late afternoon, the day had changed shape. It wasn't a question anymore. It was a map. Alan had me sign 3 forms I won't remember by name. Detective King texted to say the video parsed clean. The timestamps matched. The audio was unambiguous. The ADA followed with 2 sentences. "Stay boring. If she provokes, decline to be interesting." I took that as my religion until dinner. Michelle called at 5:30. I let it go once and then answered because the one thing that you can't do with women like her is leave them alone with their narrative. "You satisfied?" she asked, voice calm, in that way. A lake is calm when the current beneath is doing calculus. "You managed to embarrass us in front of a judge." "I managed to keep a girl out of the cold," I said. "You managed to turn a family disagreement into a police matter," she pressed. "You think you won?" "You didn't." "You set a timer," I said. The sentence made me catch my breath. How a woman reveals herself with her own metaphors. "Don't put the girl back in any room without heat," I said. "I'm not doing this for sport." She laughed, a sound with nothing soft in it. "You never did anything that wasn't a performance. Enjoy your spotlight, Mom. I'll see you Sunday." "Sunday?" I asked, though I already knew. "CPS supervised visitation." She hung up without answering. Women like her love nothing more than a line without a period. Night came the way winter nights come on Maple Ridge. One light at a time, one furnace at a time, one dog bark fed to another, and sent down the block like a chain of custody. I made spaghetti because it was a shape Emma understood, even on days she didn't understand the rest. She twirled noodles and told me about a science project she wants to build. "A rubber band car. You wind it," she said, eyes bright. "And then it goes." "Careful with rubber bands," I said, and we both laughed at the coincidence nobody asked for. At 7 there was a knock, not the doorbell. This was too polite, the rap of someone who doesn't know the camera or who wants to pretend she doesn't. I opened to Cameron, standing with his wallet hugged close and a face that looked like a person who'd just found a mirror that refuses to lie. "Can I come in?" he asked. I looked at the clock, at the girl, at the protective order by the magnets. "You can," I said, for 10 minutes with the door open. He stepped into the hall light and let the air find him. "I brought this," he said, pulling a spiral notebook from his jacket. It was the kind children use when they're made to practice good habits, until the paper is done with them. He thumbed to a page in the middle. "She wrote this after one of the nights. I didn't know what to do with it. I copied it when she was at school. I'm sorry it took me this long." The page was wide-ruled blue, with a red margin like a boundary the words were good at ignoring. In Emma's careful, school-taught hand, a paragraph. "Cold makes me better because it cleans the part of me that thinks I am important. Cold is my friend because it teaches me quiet. If I am still enough, the cold will like me and go away." I read it twice because I couldn't believe a child had been fed these sentences and not choked. The first shock of the protocol had been anger. This was grief, the kind that sees the shape of the harm. Emma came to my elbow without being called. She looked at the page and then at her father's hands on his wallet. "Dad," she said, not unkindly, "you can't make me write that again." Cameron put one hand over his mouth as if the words could be gathered back in time. The other hand shook. "I know," he said. "Your mother said—" He stopped. When he spoke again, he was hunting for the present tense like a life raft. I don't know why I listened. I'm listening now. "Listening means paper," I said, not to be cruel, but because the day had taught me the only language that lets sinners back through the door. "You'll talk to the detective. You'll talk to CPS and say this wasn't a one-time mistake. You'll say it out loud, even if you don't like how it tastes." He nodded, tears that looked less like a performance and more like a dam that finally resigned. "And you'll keep Michelle from trying to come take her tonight?" I added. His laugh was a laugh, not sound. "I don't keep Michelle," he said, honest in a way I hadn't heard. "But I won't help her." He looked at Emma for permission, and then leaned down and kissed the top of her head, like someone handing a thing back to the person it belongs to. "I'm sorry," he said into her hair. "Okay," she answered, which is how children pronounce both absolution and "we will see." He left with his shoulders not higher but straighter. The door stayed open until the night itself felt better about it. I texted Detective King a photo of the notebook page with Cameron's permission stamped across the bottom in a message. "You can have it." The detective answered like a person who keeps her phone on for the right reasons. "Got it, thank you. This matters." When the house settled, I sat with the protocol and the notebook page and the laminated sin of it. And I saw the thing the day wanted me to see. This wasn't greed using cold as a stick. This was a woman who wanted to train a child to stop being a person and start being a mirror. The money was a symptom. The cold was the plan. Midpoint is a word writers use. In life, it's the moment when the path you thought you were on turns under your feet and points at the hard hill. Instead of the scenic overlook, I stopped thinking about not failing, about doing enough for tonight. I started thinking like a woman who will take a hill. I called Alan. "We need to seek a no-contact order for Michelle, if there's any violation," I said, "and we need to be ready for her to try something before Sunday, because the minute she reads the order's fine print, it'll itch." "Already drafted," Alan said, and I could hear his pen knocking a steady tempo against the desk. "Tomorrow we file the longer petition. Tonight you sleep in the chair and keep the recorder on the table within reach, in case the doorbell decides to be dramatic." "I like when you talk home security," I said. "Then you'll love this," he replied. "I asked a friend at the bank to flag any attempts to open products in your name this week. Won't stop it. We'll slow it. Your daughter likes pressure. We'll remove the timeline." "Bless the people who slow things," I said. We hung up. At 9, the doorbell camera showed a car paused 2 houses down. It idled, reconsidered, then drove on. Maybe coincidence. Maybe the universe rehearsing. I wrote it in the notebook anyway. 9:04. Dark sedan. Paused. Moved on. One day, even the harmless details earn their keep. Emma fell asleep as if her body understood more than her mind. The kind of tired that comes when your organism decides it's safe enough to power down. I moved the blanket to her chin and stood in the doorway to the hall. The office door was still locked. The porch light still burned. I thought of the ledger and the sentence about cold being a friend and felt the smallest, fiercest thank you for paper. It had saved my life more than once. Schematics, measurements, a recipe Bob wrote in pencil for the stew that could cure a Tuesday. Now it would save a girl. The judge's paper, the deputy's paper, the doctor's paper, the protocol itself. Damning because a woman who worships control can't resist an outline. The house took a breath. So did I. Somewhere outside, the train spoke its iron language and counted the blocks between us. Inside, my phone buzzed once more. Detective King. Reminder, if anything tonight feels off, call me before you decide you're old enough to handle it alone. I texted back. Copy. Then, because a woman can learn new tricks even in her 70s, I added thank you. She wrote, "You're doing the job." So I did it. I sat. I kept the chair. I let the night pass through the vents and not through a child's bones. And when the clock in the hall argued with itself about whether it was 10:30 or 11, I stopped listening for once to anything but the breath from the couch and the simple math of it, one in, one out, and the knowledge that the worst of the day had been named and would not, if I could help it, be allowed to keep its shape. By Saturday, the paper was doing its job. The protective order hung inside the hall closet like a small flag that meant, in plain language, keep the girl warm and do not improvise. The house learned the new routine fast. Breakfast, notes in the notebook, a walk around the block with our collars up, a check of the doorbell camera like a sailor checks the horizon. At noon, the bank called, Alan's quiet favor paying dividends. "Mrs. Sullivan," the manager said, her voice built entirely of decorum. "We received an application for a line of credit in your name, submitted online at 11:06 a.m. The answers to our security questions were creative. We declined and have placed a hold on new applications for 72 hours. You will receive a letter." You could hear in the careful grammar the part she could not say. "Someone is trying to shake money out of you, and we put our hand over the donation box. Thank you," I said, and wrote the time in the notebook and handed the pen to Emma so she could circle it in red. She took the job very seriously, and then asked if we could make grilled cheese. We were washing the pan when Detective King texted. "CPS interviews complete. Sunday 2 p.m. supervised at our center. Mother unhappy. Father less so. Keep your bell on." I didn't know whether she meant the doorbell or the sense God gives you. Either way, I set both to loud. Late afternoon stormed in on a wind that tested the old windows for stories. The sky went the color of tin. The maple in Mrs. Chen's yard showed the pale undersides of its leaves, small warning flags from a previous century. By 5, the streetlights blinked on in unison. By 5:10, the power hiccuped once, twice, then caught itself like a woman tripping and pretending she meant to dance. "Do we need candles?" Emma asked, already halfway to the drawer where Bob used to keep the birthday tapers and the emergency real ones. "We need readiness," I said, which is candles that can find the matches without doing a comedy. We set a small platoon on the table and one on the mantel. We ate early on purpose, soup again, a reheated promise, and washed dishes with the radio mumbling about gusts and scattered outages. At 7:19, the heat clicked off. The first thing you notice when a furnace surrenders is the absence. The second is the way the house remembers how to be cold. I checked the breaker. Fine. Thermostat still pleading with an empty vent. Then the doorbell camera pinged with the small insistent sound of bad timing. I opened the app and saw the side yard view I didn't know I needed until I had it. A figure at the gas meter, crouched in the posture of a woman telling herself she is being clever. Hood up, gloves on. But posture is a signature, and I've known her since before she could spell her name. "Get your coat," I said to the girl, voice level. "Boots, hat. We're going to Mrs. Chen's." She didn't argue. She pulled on readiness the way she pulled on the fleece. I texted King and Allen with thumbs I kept steady through the sheer force of stubbornness. "A gas meter tampering. Furnace down. Leaving for neighbors. Camera recording." Then, because a woman can learn, I tapped the side button. 911. Riverside County doesn't make you introduce yourself twice. "Stay inside," the dispatcher said. "Deputies are on their way. Are you safe to exit with the child?" "I will be if I leave now," I said. "She has a history of blocking doors." "Then go now," she said. "Stay on the line." We went out the back instead of the front, because a long life teaches you the value of an exit that isn't the obvious one. The alley held its breath. The wind knifed down from nowhere and everywhere. I tucked Emma under my arm and kept the duffel strap across my chest, like a sash a braver woman might deserve. We made the gate. We were halfway to the Chen porch when a car nose appeared at the mouth of the alley. Dark, idling, like a thought someone didn't want to admit to. Headlights flared and then dipped. The engine crept forward with the entitlement of a person convinced the world is her hallway. Back, I said, pivoting us into the shadow of Mrs. Chen's hedge. The car paused at my garage as if it had been told to stop there in a previous version of the story. The passenger door opened. A woman I didn't know got out, stocky in a way that made me think of hired help. The kind Michelle would swear was a friend if asked under oath. She looked down the alley, up, then tapped the roof twice. The driver's door opened. Michelle? She wore no coat. She wore purpose like a heating element. She had something in her hand. Not a weapon. Not quite. More like a wrench with opinions. She went to my gas meter and crouched where she'd crouched before. The camera caught her as if it had studied for a test. Maggie, the dispatcher said in my ear. Deputy, 2 minutes out. Copy, I said. I have never wanted more to be 20 and invisible. Instead, I was my age, and evident with a girl's breath, fogging at my side, in small brave clouds. Grandma, Emma whispered into the fleece. My chest is okay. I just want you to know. I do know, I said. Keep it okay? We waited while the car's exhaust wrote nonsense in the cold. When Michelle and her help finished their sabotage and turned to go back to the street, we cut across the lawn and took the Chen steps 2 at a time. The door opened before we knocked. Some neighbors are part of your skeleton. Mrs. Chen made a space with her body and a shape with her arms that said in clear grammar, Get in. The warmth hit like light. I smelled stew and pledge and a small dog protesting the existence of my boots. In, she said again, and only then looked over my shoulder past the hedge. She brought company. Company is unwelcome, I said. Deputy is invited. She nodded like a general on a comfortable salary. Sit. I'll call my grandson to hook the camera to the TV. She handed Emma a mug. Hot chocolate. Doctor's orders. The girl looked at me. Doctor's orders? I confirmed, because sometimes it helps to hear the law say yes. We watched our own side yard on Mrs. Chen's television, while our own house across the way grew colder on purpose. Michelle and the other woman came up the walk and tried my front door with the breezy confidence of people who believe doors owe them. They knocked. They rang. The new camera's speaker recorded Michelle's voice with the fidelity of a confession booth. Mom, she called. I know you're in there. Your heat's out. You shouldn't keep Emma in a cold house. Let me take her. We'll get warm. Mrs. Chen's grandson used the remote like a surgeon. Listen, he murmured, boosting the audio. I'm recording. My doorbell said in its cherubic robot voice. Michelle stepped back and looked straight into the lens as if she'd decided to argue with it. Mom, she said again, precise now, salesman direct. It's unsafe. Be reasonable. Sirens arrived from 2 different directions. Blue light throwing honest geometry down Maple Ridge. Deputy Harris's cruiser slid into the gap at my curb like a puzzle piece. Another unit parked at the corner. Harris stepped out, hat on. Posture that makes the foolish remember algebra. Evening, he said, which is what he says when evening is what it isn't. Trouble with your furnace? My mother's having an episode, Michelle said smoothly, pointing to the house that was currently doing its forced impression of an icebox. She took my daughter and now won't answer the door. We smelled gas. We came to get the girl to a warm place. Harris glanced at the meter like a man noticing the punchline before the joke. Smelled gas from the alley, did you? He bent, not touching, just looking. What's this with the shutoff? Looks fresh. The second deputy took a position not far from the passenger door of the dark car and had the quiet idea to shine a light into it. The passenger, Michelle's friend, decided to produce identification so quickly it looked like a reflex. That solved the question of whether she was a friend or a person who brings her own name to a problem. Ma'am, Harris said to Michelle, gentle as an usher. Step over here with me. He angled them toward my doorbell camera because experience teaches you that devices deserve a front row seat. You're under a protective order at the moment to keep the girl safe, Michelle said. Exactly. Right now the girl is with a safe caregiver, Harris said. That caregiver reported tampering with a gas meter. Reported? Michelle repeated, head cocked to the side like a person trying to make a word confess. She's confused. She thinks she sees what she wants to see. Harris did not look at the lens. He let it look at him. You just told me you smelled gas, he said. And here we are. Let's stay on one channel. A new set of headlights painted the hedges. Detective King stepped out of an unmarked car, wearing a wool coat that looked like authority bought it on sale. She showed her badge with the ease of someone who's had to show it to women who enjoy not believing in badges. Evening, she said to Harris, then to Michelle. We all chose a cold night to be theatrical. Detective, Michelle said, turning the word into a compliment she could weaponize later. My daughter's inside a freezing house. I need to get her to warmth. Is that a crime? It's not a crime to care, King said. It's a crime to engineer the need for your care by shutting off your mother's gas. She tilted her head toward my camera. Smile. Michelle almost did, then didn't. Do you have proof? Doorbell video, she said. 2 angles, 1 neighbor video, plus the protective order, plus Riverside County's patience, which you have misjudged. Michelle recovered that salesman poise. I called 911, she said. You're welcome. So did the grandmother, King said. She did it from somewhere warm with the child. She did not bring a friend to help her wrestle utility fittings. She looked at Harris. I'd like you to place her in cuffs for violating the order and for tampering. We'll let the county attorney sort the rest. Michelle put up one hand, palm out, not quite surrender. This is an overreaction. You people are making... The rest of the sentence fell apart under the small, unremarkable sound of handcuffs doing a job they didn't invent, but perform with unarguable grammar. The second deputy eased the friend against the car with the tenderness professionals save for dangerous tasks. The friend found her manners just in time. Mrs. Chen made a soft noise that was not triumphant, not relief exactly. More like a prayer that had finally learned how to stand. Emma took one long breath, her chest lifting under the fleece, and let it out without a squeak. Warm enough? I asked. Warm because, she said. Not finishing the sentence because she didn't have to. King phoned the gas company. In 20 minutes, a man in a jacket that said what he was, knelt at my meter and made the world right in a few practice turns. Whoever fiddled with this knew enough to be annoying, he said, not enough to be safe. He turned the furnace back on, hovered to be sure it caught, wrote his report like he'd been taught penmanship by a man who believed cursive could save democracy. Harris walked across to Mrs. Chen's and knocked. We'd left the door open for him. He stepped into the warmth and took his hat off to be polite to a room that deserved it. She's in custody, he said. It won't solve the week, but it will make the next few hours less interesting. Boring is my new religion, I said. Keep practicing, he said. Detective King is calling the ADA. You'll likely have a late-night chat. The call came while the furnace pushed new coins of heat through the vents. Ada Stone, crisp, not unkind. We're booking her on violation of a protective order and tampering with a utility. The video is helpful. The timing is helpful. The part where she argued with the doorbell is more helpful than she imagines. For now, you stay put. Do not engage if she posts bail and tries to communicate. We'll add that to the list. List is getting long, I said. That's what lists do when they're honest, she answered. Try to sleep. We walked home under stars that had decided the storm was no longer entertaining. Inside the house sighed, grateful to be a house again, and not an unkind experiment. The vents whispered back into corners they'd abandoned an hour before. Emma stood by one and put her hands over it like a camper at a fire. Hello, she said to the warm air. And in that moment, the entire point of living past 70 became obvious. I checked the camera footage again because paper and pixels are the sands I've learned to build on. The files saved with names that would mean something. To a tired woman in the morning. Meter, 7:19 p.m. Porch, 7:26 p.m. Arrest, 7:33 p.m. I copied them to the toothpick and wrote the exact time. I did so in the notebook like an apprentice trying to impress a hard-nosed foreman. Emma brushed her teeth, inhaler on the sink like a talisman, and chose the couch voluntarily. She said the upstairs felt too far from the vent tonight. I tucked the wool blanket around her and tucked something else under the edges while I was at it. The idea that women can do something other than harm. It's a kind of origami, that tuck. It looks like bedding and is really a vow. The doorbell pinged one more time, a ghost of habit. So I looked. Not Michelle. Cameron. He stood at the sidewalk talking to Detective King, hands out of his pockets, face naked. King listened, the kind of listening that is half paperwork and half priesthood. She took the spiral, notebook page Cameron had brought last night, and asked him if he'd be willing to say out loud what he'd been saying in ink. Cameron nodded and I watched him sign, his name on the detective's clipboard like a person, making covenant with the version of himself that can face a mirror. We slept in shifts, Emma easily, me in the chair, the furnace humming confession under the floorboards. At 2 a.m. my heart did its small wild thing, and then remembered the cardiologist's numbers. In for 4, out for 6. I breathed the math and it worked, as math sometimes does when feelings can't. I checked the porch a last time. Empty street, blue light gone. Just the fat domestic glow of the lamp Mrs. Chen keeps on late for anybody's sake. Sometime before dawn, I dreamed about a ship in a bottle. In the dream, someone had dissolved the glue at the neck, and the ship slid out. Not grandly, not like a parade. Just gently, as if it had always been the right size for real water. When morning found us, it arrived without drama. The crisis had spent itself against people who turned out in the end to be mildly heroic, at the very boring act of keeping a child warm. The climax was not a speech in a courtroom or a punch. It was a door that did not open to the wrong hands, and a furnace that resumed its small domestic song. If you're lucky, the big moments wear small clothes. I wrote the last line of the night in the notebook with the kind of care reserved for things that have earned it. 2:41 a.m. Heat steady, girl asleep, house intact. We bent and did not break. Tomorrow there would be Sunday and supervised visitation, and faces that would try to rehearse themselves back into innocence. Tomorrow we would bring our paper, and our patience, and the little orange inhaler, and the memory of a doorbell that learned to tell the truth. Tonight, no. Now that the dark had begun to thin, there was a quiet kitchen and bread to be toasted, and a girl who would wake to say, toast, like it was a password. And I would answer, toast, because it was a Sunday opened like a fist unclenching. The storm had walked itself off in the night, leaving the street bright and scrubbed and the kind of cold that minds its manners. The furnace made its small domestic hymn under the floorboards. I wrote the first line of the day in the notebook, because habits become railings when the stairs are steep. 7:06, girl wakes warm, breathing easy, asks for toast. Toast, Emma said from the couch, hair flattened on one side and wild on the other, a girl halfway between shipwreck and parade. Toast, I answered, because we had earned the right to keep some things simple. She ate in the absorbed way of someone building a foundation one bite at a time. Between slices, she assembled the rubber band car she'd been dreaming about, the kit Mrs. Chen's grandson had loaned her, tucked into the tamale bag like contraband. She wound the axle, set the toy on the floor, and let it go. It skittered across the rug and bumped the baseboard with a sound too small to be victory. And somehow exactly that. Better rubber bands, she announced. These are tired. We'll buy new, I said. Rubber bands are for going, not for chests. She grinned the quick grin children get when their world begins to agree with them. Alan called at 9. CPS confirmed 2 p.m. at the center on Oakmont, he said. I'll meet you there with a folder and my least theatrical tie. Ada Stone may swing by. Detective King will be on call. On call? I repeated, tasting the phrase. It felt like a hand on a shoulder from a room away. And Maggie, he added, voice lowering into the gear that moves people toward a thing they don't want to do. Michelle posted bail at 3:01 a.m. The order still holds. The tampering charge sticks to her like burrs, but she'll be there at 2, unless someone smarter than she is talks her out of it. Then we'll be there at 2 with our paper, I said, and with the girl's coat zipped. We packed deliberately. Inhaler, 2 mandarins, the notebook. Front page now, a minor topography of underlines. Protective order, discharge instructions, the deputy's notice, a copy of the winter compliance protocol that I slipped into a plastic sleeve of my own, like a message in a bottle I was willing to show anybody. The toothpick went into my shirt pocket. I caught my reflection in the hall mirror and saw a woman dressed like a file cabinet. There are worse uniforms. At noon, Dr. Morrison texted. Checking in? If anything feels off at visitation, you can end it. You are authorized caregiver. He amended it with the kind of sentence most doctors only remember to send when they've decided medicine includes small acts of heroism. Proud of you both. At 1:30, Mrs. Chen knocked with 2 things wrapped in tissue. A new pair of wool socks and a photo of Emma in her grandson's outgrown coat, snapped on the porch because she knows evidence wears many faces. In case anyone forgets what a warm child looks like, she said. You show them this. The CPS Center on Oakmont had tried to look less like a government building and more like a school library. Murals of storybook animals did their best to supervise the lobby. A woman with a clipboard smiled with her whole face and said, I'm Lana. In a voice that had practice at making hard days sit down and drink water, she gave Emma a badge with her first name only, and me a badge that said, caregiver, and felt, because a lanyard can do this, like an oath. Alan arrived in a coat that had too many pockets for the amount of paper he carried. He squeezed my shoulder. How's the ship? He asked. The private shorthand we'd built around bottles and glue and the business of getting a girl back to water. Wants to sail, I said. Has an engine now. A rubber band. Lana led us to a room with 2 couches and a low table and a one-way window you stop noticing after your 3rd breath if you want to live. We keep visits short at first, she said. We end them shorter if the child asks. You don't have to be brave for anyone in this building. Brave is for the car ride home. Cameron arrived first, alone. His wallet looked lighter by a pound, as if he'd taken a few stones out of it you couldn't see. May I hug her? He asked Lana, not me. And that was new. You can ask her, Lana said. She gets to answer. Emma stepped forward and let him hug her for exactly the time she wanted, and no more. When he let go, he looked at her the way you look at weather from a safe porch. Respectful, a little frightened of the power. I talked to the detective, he said. I told her about the notebook. I told her about the timers. I told her to stop, and then I didn't make her. Emma nodded as if cataloging his verbs. Okay, she said. The exact syllable for a ledger that has begun to balance. Michelle arrived on the dot of 2 with a lawyer I didn't know, and the kind of calm that reads like a woman measuring a new room for furniture she may or may not own. She took the chair opposite Emma and leaned forward, elbows on knees, charm dialed to 3 to sell sincerity instead of a car. Hey, sweetie, she said. I missed you. Hi, Emma said. She didn't sit back. She didn't lean forward. She found the geometry half my life took me to learn. Michelle looked at me and Alan, and the window she knew was a window, and decided to perform for all 3. We made some mistakes, she said to the air as much as to her daughter. We were strict when we should have been patient. Your grandmother has always hated my discipline. That's fine. I'm willing to be coached. We can do therapy. We can do whatever the court wants. Let's not turn this into a circus. Good, Lana said toward the room from the small chair near the door where supervisors sit. We like therapy. We like clear, boring, safe. Emma's hands found each other, fingers lacing. A move I have seen on women testifying before people who can stamp paper. "No more garage," she said, looking not at her mother, but at the space rough statements go to get polished. "And no timers. And if I say I want to stop talking, we stop." Cameron nodded so hard the word almost fell off his neck. "Yes." Michelle lifted one palm. "Of course," she said. Her face did what faces do when people decide to adopt the rules for the hour and not a minute longer. "We all want what's best." "Good." Lana repeated, the syllable a bench. "We're at 15 minutes. We'll do 10 more if everyone's comfortable." They talked about small things. A science project, rubber bands, propulsion, a teacher who wears ties with planets on them, a dog from down the block that barks at leaves. Michelle's smile belonged better to these subjects. When she aimed at larger ones, return dates, who picks up from school? Lana shook her head, gentle. "Not today," she said. "Today is for remembering how to talk." At 21 minutes, Emma looked at me and then at Lana. "I'm done," she said without apology. "Visit complete," Lana said, writing the words the way people write things that count twice. Once now, once later. Cameron squeezed her hand with the humility that comes from a lesson too late, and maybe still in time. Michelle stood, rearranged her coat into a woman and said to me, "You got your show," like a person giving away a trophy she thinks you stole. "Sunday at 2 again next week," Lana said from the door. "Same rules, less talking, more listening." In the lobby, Detective King materialized the way people do, who've learned how to be everywhere, without being the point. She nodded at me, at Alan, at the girl. "Ladies, sir," she said. Her phone buzzed and she glanced and then looked up, business clicking into gear. "ADA Stone asked me to relay. Arraignment tomorrow on the tampering and order violation. Don't go to the courthouse unless you want to be entertained for the wrong reasons. We've requested a condition. No contact outside supervised visitation. Expect noise. Treat it like weather." "What about her attempt at a line of credit?" I asked. King tilted her head toward Alan. "Your counsel's already filed the fraud alerts. We opened an incident to attach to the tampering file. Slow is still speed." Alan smiled in the dry way. Only a man who has slept 3 hours and eaten 2 crackers can. "We like slow," he said. "We like the kind of slow that arrives before something else." Back home, we kept being dull on purpose. I showed Emma the small bedroom that had been Bob's office, and then a museum of things I wasn't ready to take to the thrift store. We cleared it together carefully, like the kind of excavation archaeologists write articles about. The old desk went to the garage, the filing cabinet onto a shelf where it could look over her shoulder without making her feel watched. We set up a narrow bed, with sheets that still smelled faintly of the cedar chest. She put the rubber band car on the dresser like a mascot. "Is this my room?" she asked in the voice you use when you're trying not to make a word too heavy and failing. "It's your room," I said, "as long as the people with stamps and seals say so, and after that, if you want it." She tested the mattress with a slow sit, then lay back and stared at the ceiling. "It looks different than your living room ceiling," she observed. "Every room makes its own map out of cracks," I said. "You'll learn this one by heart, and then we'll patch the biggest line together so it knows who's boss." Dinner was spaghetti again because routine tastes like safety. We set an extra place out of habit, and then put the plate back, because habit needs coaching. Mrs. Chen sent over a slice of cake with a note that said simply, "For the court of public opinion, bite this," which is a joke a good neighbor gets to make after she opens her door at the right minutes of a life. At 8, we packed her backpack for school. We added the inhaler with a label. We tucked in a letter from the CPS caseworker to the school. We put the photograph of Emma in the warm coat in an envelope with Ms. Lockwood's name because we are building an ecosystem, not a moment. She brushed her teeth in the new bathroom, her bathroom by adjacency, and asked, mouth full of mint, Do I still get consequences? Yep, I said, relief surprising me with its friendliness. Consequences like, you can't leave your socks in the hallway because I can and will trip. Consequences like, if you roll your eyes at me, I'm obligated to say try again with your face. Consequences like, you aren't rude to Mrs. Chen or to yourself. She spit, thought, and nodded as if the laws of the new country made a kind of sense. Before bed, I took the notebook and wrote in slow block letters on a blank page. Safety plan. Then I made 2 lists in the calm language of a woman who's measured things for a living. Warmth is not a privilege. If you say stop, we stop. If your chest is tight, we use the inhaler. Then we tell someone whose job it is to help. My door stays open. The porch camera records boring things unless something interesting tries to happen, in which case it records interesting things. I showed her the list. She took the pen and added a 6th item with the concentration of a small engineer. No timers. She underlined it once, then twice. Approved, I said, initialing the bottom like it was a blueprint that would become a house. Alan called at 9 to say the bank had confirmed the freeze, all the way around my name, and that a credit monitoring service would now bark if a squirrel so much as looked at my file. It'll settle, he said. Give it 3 weeks in a court calendar. What about 3 years in a life? I asked softly. He was quiet long enough for the furnace to remind me it existed. That part you're already doing, he said. I don't bill for it. After we hung up, I did the last rounds. Front lock, back lock, porch light, camera's small, unblinking eye. I stopped at the hall closet, where the protective order hung behind magnets. That said Yellowstone and Paris, and thought about the trips we never took and the one we were taking. Now whether we'd planned it or not. The doorbell pinged once at 10 and air. Checked the feed with a pulse that behaved. It was only Detective King walking Mrs. Chen's little dog past our hedge and pretending to read a text, which is the kind of presence that feels like a benediction more than surveillance. She looked up once at the camera and tipped an imaginary hat. I waved like a woman in an old movie who has decided to live. Sleep came to Emma as if someone had turned a key. She went down in the new bed and did not stir, her face open in the unguarded way faces go when they have learned, for a few hours at least, to trust their pillow. I sat in the chair one last time because it felt superstitious not to, and because the chair has learned the shape of every version of me. The woman who thought she could manage this with charm. The woman who wanted to shout at winter. The woman who learned to let paper do her yelling. I opened the notebook to the first page and the last and measured the distance we'd walked in pen strokes. It wasn't a book yet. It was a bridge. I underlined the day's final entry. 9:37 p.m. Girl asleep in her own room. Furnace steady. Consequences redefined. On Monday, there would be arraignment without us, and small, sensible storms over paperwork and longer, quieter weather in a therapist's office, where a rubber band car might sit on the shelf until a girl needed it for a metaphor. On Wednesday, Ms. Lockwood would text a photo of Emma presenting her science project to a classroom of 3rd graders who clap like rain on a roof. On Friday, I would show her how to oil the door hinges so the cold can't sneak in pretending to be a squeak. A month from now, perhaps the judge would extend the guardianship while everyone learned the new grammar. A year from now, the future refuses planning, but sometimes allows a hope. We would still be making toast. For now the house hummed, and the window panes held, and the radiator gave off the sort of heat that makes a woman forgive it for humming. At 2 a.m., the porch light cast a tidy coin on the stoop, where people with official hats had stood, and no one stood there now. My phone, face down on the end table, stayed quiet in a way that made me want to pat it like a tired animal. I breathed in for 4, out for 6. Cardiologist approved. Prayer adjacent. Sometime near dawn, a train stitched its iron sentence across the edge of town. I listened and counted and then didn't. The kettle began to think about whistling. The day would be full of things I could do, and things I could not. The difference no longer scared me. Footsteps padded down the hall. Emma stood in the doorway, fleece zipped, socks her size for once. She looked at the ceiling as if checking her map. Then at me. "Toast," she said. "Toast," I answered, and the word meant an old woman's kitchen, and a judge's order, and a deputy's hat, and a neighbor's steady heart, and a doctor who texts back, and a lawyer who believes in crackers, and a detective who walks a small dog under cold stars, and also, amazingly, sufficiently. It meant bread. She sat. I buttered. The furnace sang. Beyond the glass, Maple Ridge woke itself up one house at a time. It would be spring soon, and then not, and then again. We would keep the girl warm each time, not with speeches or timers or schemes, but with the boring, reliable machinery of kindness and consequences that don't confuse hazard with love. After breakfast, we wound the rubber band car together and watched it go. It ran straight and true, and hit the baseboard with a click like a punctuation mark that knows what it's doing. We laughed louder than the moment required because the morning permitted it. Later I would print out today's entries and put them in the binder behind a tab that said safety plan. And maybe one day, Emma would roll her eyes properly with consequences and tell me I was old-fashioned, and I would say, "Try again with your face." And she would laugh and fix it, and the furnace would still be humming. For now there was only this: a warm room, a girl breathing, the clink of a plate on a table, and the small handshake between a promise and the day. The ship, freed of its bottle, didn't need a speech to know the direction of water. It needed breakfast and a hand at its stern. And the knowledge, simple, hard-won, that home, properly maintained, is a place where winter comes to the door and finds it politely, permanently closed. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you are here.